Good morning, everyone. This is Pastor Robert Wilson with God's Way Apostolic Cathedral, a non-denominational ministry. I hope and pray that everyone had a great weekend and that they're, of course, still with us and have an ability to listen to the pastor's table. We had a wonderful message yesterday in service. It was called A Time to Go Back. There will be a part two because there were some things she didn't get a chance to cover that I thought was very pertinent to it's time to go back to God. But this morning I'm going to talk about an opportunity for your blessing. I've been talking about things we need to do to change, to really get into a position where we can receive God's blessing. But I just want to name off a couple of people in the Bible and kind of the things that they did to get their blessings. Okay, I'm going to start off with Job. And if you don't know about Job, Job was considered a very righteous man in God's sight, and the devil decided to attack Job, and God allowed it to happen. And Job ended up losing his family, and he ended up losing his health. But yet he never turned on God, and he stayed fast and true and faithful, and God blessed him. Joseph was falsely accused because his brothers didn't like him, or they sold him, and they didn't like him because he was a little bit arrogant about his status with his dad, and they end up beating him up and selling him into slavery. Well, he was falsely accused when he was making strides. He was being promoted in his position. Even though he was a slave, he became the head of the house of his master, outside, of course, of the master. And he got falsely accused because the master's wife wanted him and he refused her. So then he was falsely imprisoned, and he stayed in prison for a while. He was forgotten by his friends and everything, but yet he didn't turn on God. And the reason why I'm giving you these, because I'm asking you, which one of these opportunities are you going to be a part of? Are you going to accept and then go all the way through for your blessings? David. Now, David sit there. We all know about him and Bathsheba, and he had the man killed, but he also had family issues. One of his sons was trying to kill him, and we can say one of his friends was trying to kill him. Now, how many of us can go through that, and instead of trying to retaliate like we do in the streets, we sit there and say, no, I'm not going to harm him. I'd rather take myself out of the equation instead of trying to retaliate and kill him. Yes, David stayed blessed because God called David a man after his own heart. Esther, Queen Esther. Now, Esther's biggest thing was she had to choose between herself and her people, because it was getting to a point where they were about to kill them all. And even though she was the queen, she could have been exempt from what was about to happen. But would that have been right? See, now we're talking about making a selfless choice about what you're going to do. Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for some, in this case, for somebody else? Abraham had to kill a loved one. Now, if the thought of God telling you to kill a loved one came up, could you, would you, or even you think about trying to do it? Jacob had to deal with what he gave. Now, in the case of Jacob, he had a brother Esau. They were born together as twins. Esau actually came out a little bit before Jacob, but Jacob held on to him. And Jacob, I don't consider the first one a bamboozle, because he just asked him for some soup, and he said, or stew, and he told him, I'll give you some if you give up your birthright. But what he did to Isaac, as far as bamboozling Isaac out of the blessing, all this trickery and stuff along those lines, can you take what you give, is basically what I'm going with Jacob. Because Jacob had to take it back when he wanted Rachel. And her father ended up, after they made an agreement that he would work for Rachel, gave him Leah instead. Now, he could have been mad, had a pitch to fit, and did all kind of things, but he didn't. What he did was he went back to work for 7 years, because that was the agreement for the first one, was 7 years. So he put in 14 years of his time. He sacrificed so that he can get what he wanted, which in this case was Rachel's, a love of his life. Are you willing to sacrifice and put up with things that you have put others through? Now, Gideon had to take up a position that he never felt like he was qualified for. Same along the lines of Moses. But Gideon was really wimpy. And he put God through a lot of little questions and tests, asking God, if it's really you, do this, if it's really you, do that, and I know there are some of us that go along that line. But when it came time to step up, Gideon stepped up. Are you one that you may ask God, if it's you, make the sky blue today, make it gray tomorrow, whatever, and God does it, but when it's time for you to step up, do you step up? Ruth. Now, Ruth actually went away from her upbringing because Ruth was not a part of Naomi. Now, what happened in this case, Naomi was an older woman. She had a husband and her two sons and two ladies from we could say, different race. Married into the family, and they had their own upbringing, their own culture and whatever. But when the men died, Ruth chose to stay with Naomi because she felt that her God was true. So she changed a whole lot about herself to stay what she felt was true. And in the end, she was blessed. She humbled herself. She did what she had to do. She didn't go out of her way. She didn't go out there flashing all her goodness and everything else. No, she stayed humble, and she got basically Prince Charming, which in the case was Boaz. Peter, in the case of Peter. Now, Peter was a brash, braggart, very, in a sense, volatile type of person. And he would, that type that run their mouth. Yeah, I can do this. And if you did this and I do these things, blah, 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 blah. And then God said, you know what? Basically, he ain't nothing but a bunch of hot air. Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows in the morning. Peter, of course, denied it. Of course, it did happen. He ran away in shame, crying because he knew he wasn't nothing but what the Lord said, a bunch of hot air. But when the time came to stand up, Peter stood up. Yes, it was after the day of Pentecost and they received the Holy Spirit. But he stood up and he redeemed himself for what he was doing beforehand. Are you one of those? The case of Paul. Now, Paul was going around crucifying the saints. He didn't believe what they were doing, and he was being all pumped up by his partners and his friends to be all this way. Yeah, I'm the killer of the Christians. I'm the killer of the Christians. And he went around doing all these things. But then when God struck him down on his way to Damascus, on the road to Damascus, as they like to say, what did he do? He humbled himself. He realized that he was in error, and he became one of the greatest apostles in the Bible. Then I want to talk about Stephen. Stephen sit there and he heard actually Paul, when he was Saul, and a bunch of his partners laughing and joking and talking about how against God. And he stood up to him. He stood up to authority. Even though it cost him his life, he stood up to authority. And he was received into heaven the same way God looked down on Jesus when he was baptized. Are you someone that's going to be willing to stand up even though you may be found in the wrong and you're going to be persecuted? Are you willing to stand up for that? And then, of course, there is Jesus. In the case of Jesus, we all know that Jesus died for people he has never physically met. Yes, he is part of the Trinity, and yes, they know all, but he never physically met you, and he died for you. And the question is, are you willing to sacrifice your life for someone that you have never met? We're talking about unconditional love. I already can hear, oh no, that wouldn't be me. That wouldn't be me. But you never know when God pushes that button. Would you be the one that run out as a car is on fire and you didn't know the person and you broke the window and you put your life in danger and you pulled them out the car? Somebody was in the water, child or whoever, and you really don't know how to swim and you jump into the water and you say, that is sacrificing. Okay, you just don't know it, but are you that person also? And in the end, everyone who was willing to give up their life for someone else, some part of their being for something else more positive in God, was all blessed. Galatians 5:24. Now those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. So that means you learn to put those things on the back burner. You learn to basically have it where it has no more effect in your life. And it is a work in progress, but the work should be you're piling up more of the spirit and less of the flesh. With that being said, this is Pastor Robert Wilson signing off, saying I'll pray that you all have a blessed day, because there's nothing wrong with living a good life, and love is truly the key, and try it God's way. Everybody have a blessed day. Bye-bye.